Yes, that's right. And actually, Ian did a lot of work in the time since we last met. I'll let him talk about it. Not
Awesome.
to.
For sure. So yeah, I shared with you, the timing was kind of bad. I just shared it with you, but I shared a doc with you, Michael, that was the UX map that I put together for a pretty common user journey that we have, which is to come to the registry and look for a specific tag. And that's actually kind of it for the journey. And so mapping it out, we looked at all the individual steps, and there was some definite like UX highlight areas, like you kind of mentioned would happen. After kind of reviewing it and looking it over, I've noticed that I think the areas I want to explore focus in on why specifically they're coming to look for data and kind of what they're expecting their next step to be. This is the area that I think GitLab has a unique opportunity, because all of our competitors kind of serve to this end that we're already accomplished with. And there's some usability improvements we could make, but we're kind of fulfilling the basic need. But like how to navigate them back to the parts that are relevant to them is what I want to explore, I think, for this next research effort. One of the reasons I'm feeling kind of confident to do that and why I want to move in that direction is Tim and I and Lori, a UX researcher that we get to work with, are trying to put together a survey to understand, what data is most important and least important to our users. And so I'd like, as the next step, to talk to actual users and figure out why those pieces of data are relevant and what they're doing with them next.
Okay.
So that's kind of the evolution we went in a week.
Okay, that's awesome. That sounds like some pretty good progress. How did you decide to do the next step as a survey?
We kind of have a situation where we don't know what we don't know. And so a survey is a great way to kind of get some baseline data. So we can figure out, for example, what data does a package user really care about? What's most important to them? Is there variance between the data that's important for NPM versus the container versus Maven? Is there any discrepancies or similarities there? And I think that data will help glean what's most important to be talking to our users about and how to escalate that. So it kind of serves as that quantitative data set to give us direction.
I would actually strongly encourage you to do it the opposite way. So typically what I do when I'm at a stage where I don't know what I don't know, what I want to do is have conversations where I can try to figure out what I don't know yet. To draft a survey, it requires me to know what questions to ask and to frame it the right way. And so the risk is that depending on what I'm asking, I'll get information back based on what I'm asking, but I might not be asking the right questions. So what I usually prefer to do is have some deeper conversations with people to really get some initial understanding of like, what data is important to you, what do you use it for this thing versus that thing, whatever, and understand like, am I like getting the right stuff? But it allows me to zoom out a little bit and understand some context and know like, oh, actually there's this other thing that's important to them that I didn't even like realize. And that's the piece that they want, or that's this other task that's much more important or whatever. And then after I have that, it usually helps me informs how I phrase the questions that I'm asking usually, and make sure I'm asking all the right questions. Because otherwise, you do the survey and you're like, oh, we learned this, and maybe we have some false confidence in what we learned, or we don't realize what we're missing. Like you don't necessarily know what you don't know yet from doing that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do pose a question with kind of the way we structured this survey is around some data that we know is kind of finite. So we know what NPM data is available. And right now we are kind of facing every piece of data is equally valuable as far as we kind of understand it. So that's why I kind of ventured into that survey realm, is we had the finite list and it's pretty small, so we can glean that data pretty quickly without hopefully getting too kind of swaying results or false confidence, just because it's, a finite problem, right? It's got bounds, which we kind of know. So I guess we knew a little bit more and I kind of gave us credit for it. Does that resonate with you, or do you think that we should still like take another step back?
I guess, I mean, maybe the starting point I have is further back than where you are. It sounds like maybe you essentially have done that first part that I'm describing. You already know what's needed, right? You already have that context, et cetera, that I don't really have. Right, so it sounds like you feel confident that you know what questions to ask at this stage already.
I think so, just because of the user interviews we've already done. But I don't want to, I don't mind proceeding with caution, if that makes sense. I'd rather do it right than guess, but I think we're there. I think we're at the point that we know enough to get the survey to give us real data, or data that's valuable, as opposed to a survey that kind of gives you the data you want to hear, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I didn't imply that you're trying to get stuff that you wanted to hear. That's not what I meant. Okay, and so then I guess two questions also, because I've been talking to the other groups there. How are you going to survey people? Like, how are you be able to reach the people you want to reach? Because it seemed like some of the other groups were unsure how to necessarily what the options were to do that. And then also, how will you structure a survey to be able to kind of prioritize these things?
For sure. So we get to partner directly with Lori. Part of their jump function is to help us find users for surveys or interviews or anything like that. So they have a database that we can use. I think like every company, that database is somewhat finite. So they have strategies that we can use to get participants outside of kind of their available pool. So we partner with them to kind of schedule that out. Okay,
great. So they'll take care of that part for you.
Yes, that is super handy. Takes forever, for sure.
That's always nice. Okay, and then how are you doing the survey so that you can kind of suss out what you need to about the data?
For sure. So we did it as a pretty basic survey. So the survey itself is pretty small. We're looking at kind of a couple of questions to identify what segment you belong to. And we've broken that out in a couple of ways. Kind of what's your major job function? What kind of projects are you using right now? So is it a mono repo, or is it, microservices? Because that fluctuates how you work with images and stuff like that. And then we ask them, which ones are you currently using? This question uses logic. So depending on which answers, we move them into the data set specific to that repository. So if they say they use Docker, we'll ask them questions specific to Docker afterwards. And then the probably biggest part of the survey is there's about 12 to 13 data points. And we use Qualtrics, so we're able to ask them to stack rank in terms of importance. And then hopefully if we get the survey to enough people, that stack ranking will show us some patterns. Okay.
When you do the stacked ranking, is it strictly a stacked ranking from like 1 to 12? Is that what you mean? Or is it...
Yes, that was my original plan. I didn't think it was smart to start asking them to categorize in case we have another option. So if we just blatantly missed an important data point, like they have the ability to enter that. And I thought it got more complicated if you started adding kind of sorting to that. So I was sticking with just that basic sort.
Okay. So for stacked ranking, you guys can tell me whether this is relevant in this case or not, but sometimes when you stack rank, what happens is, somebody will obviously, you'll get 1 through 12, but what can be harder to tell is the relative importance. So yes, it's like 1 is above 2, but you don't know if the case is like 1, 2, and 3 are like what's really important, and then the rest are like, yeah, whatever. If that makes sense, like sometimes if you have a way to capture importance to somebody, you see like, oh, it's really about 1 and 2 and 3, and then there's this huge drop off, and then there's like all this other stuff that like, yeah, whatever, I'll rank them, but you can't tell that from the ranking. As opposed to,
that makes a lot of sense.
There are other exercises which you can do. For example, if you tell somebody, you have $100 or 100 something, to assign importance to these things. And then you see people like, oh, I put 50 on number 1, 20 on number 2, 20 on number 3, and then like I distribute the rest across everything else. Like that tells you something very different. Right? As opposed to a stack ranking where you'd be like, oh, this is really what I need to listen to. So we
Right.
could come up with some kind of allocation exercise or some other way to have them assign relative value. But I want to check with you, like, does that, in this case, does that make sense, and does it matter? Would that be useful?
I mean, I think all data is going to be useful at some point, so I have a bias there. But what do you think, Tim, actually, before I jump in?
I maybe we should pull up the survey, because I thought it was written really well, and maybe that would help provide more context.
Yeah.
The other thing that you shared with me, I don't see. Where should I look for the mapping?
Oh, I shared it via Google Sheets. So it should be it's called UX map dash package. Since I can. Here is the link to the spreadsheet. Figured it was easier to do it this way.
Can you give me permission to that?
Yes. Sorry, give me just a second. I thought I had all this sorted ahead of time.
No problem.
Okay. I've shared it with you, and you should have access now.
Great.
And
cool. It's always so cool to see these filled out. Right. Last time I saw it, it was just like a big blank page. Now it's like somebody's done a bunch of work.
It is kind of fulfilling when you see something go from empty to full, for sure.
Especially because I didn't have to do
it. That is always nice, right? Free dinner always tastes best. And then, so do we want to review the map itself, or do you want to look at the survey?
The survey, it sounded like, was the.
All right, I just shared it with you via Google Docs, and then here's the link as well, whatever's faster for you.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to talk as I'm going through this. So if you get 385 responses, but you want to slice it by sysadmins, software developers, and DevOps, your confidence rate for each of those groups then will be quite low.
Right? That's true. I just went for a general population size for all engineers. So that's where I kind of got that larger number. Part of what I'd like to get out of this survey is if we have 385 people, how does that segmentation kind of break out? And then Lori has some experience with how to work with that. So as the survey is going on, we'll adjust the segment breakdowns to make sure the confidence rate is a little more in line with what's more important for us.
So, so which is important to you? So, I'm sorry, let me ask it a different way. So, if you, for example, if you got 95 responses from DevOps engineers, your confidence rate for the input from DevOps engineers will be quite low. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, do you think it's worth it in this situation to break it down by confidence rate per segment group? So well, even if DevOps is more important to us, there are fewer of them. So there would be fewer interviewees. Does that make sense?
I guess which group is important to you?
Which group is important to me? I'm actually Tim. I'd love to.
Yeah, I mean, do you need info about all of these, or is there one of these groups that you're really trying to nail down?
So these are the three groups of people that will be interacting with the product most, especially on this line. So part of what I'd like the survey to do is help us understand how they're different and how they're together. So that's why they're kind of broken up this way. The percentage when we have like 25% for one, 25% for another, and 50 for the DevOps is just kind of how we think those users break out in terms of using the tool. Does that?
Yeah.
How would
so I guess,
you kind of break that up? If you were doing this, how would you do it?
So if I'm understanding it right, which is not 100%, I would think if I want to have, so what you're saying, the way I'm seeing this is you want 95% confidence rate. So then to do that, I would think I would need 385 responses from sysadmins, 385 from developers, and 385 from DevOps engineers to have confidence in each of those groups, if those are distinct groups.
This
Because
is assuming that their population size is the same between the three?
I don't know if it matters what the population size is. What matters is if I have 190 responses to a survey, then my confidence rate in those responses is going to be, I'd have to look it up, but it's 15% or something.
So should we take a step back in terms of the segmentation and look at, because I thought the confidence rate was the total population size, a percentage of the population size, right? So you need to know that in order to know what the confidence rate of the survey would be? Or do I have that backwards?
Yeah, well,
so my follow-up question is, should we look at, so this is kind of a broad survey, it's not just GitLab customers. So should we look at the population size of all engineers and then figure out how to get a 95% confidence rate for them, and then figure out how many DevOps there are, and then how to get 95% for them, and so forth? Does that make sense?
I don't know that I guess the way I usually think about, I'm trying to think if I'm doing this right, but if your population is 23 million, like, I'm not sure that matters as in this case. Once it's over some size, I'm not sure that it matters in this case. How do I say what I'm trying to think? If you get 190 responses, your confidence rate because presumably there are a bazillion sysadmins, right? It's not that the population of sysadmins, the population of developers, and the population of DevOps engineers are all quite large, right?
Oh, so they're all large enough populations that you hit that point where, like the 385 mark, where the population size is large enough that if you get any more than the 385, it doesn't really matter anymore. Isn't there like a plateau for the surveys?
Right.
Okay, so because they're so large, you would expect that each group would have the same number of responses?
Or that you'd want. So if you have like, if you sample 100 people, for example, then your confidence level is plus or minus 10%.
Okay.
Right. So DevOps engineers, if you only have if you don't have enough responses and then you slice it by these other groups, your confidence for those is lower. Does that make sense?
Yes. Because you would be looking at 95 responses representing that entire population. So that's why that number would be okay.
Right. Right.
That makes sense.
Because the way I'm understanding this is each of these is a distinct group. Sysadmins you expect to be distinct from developers, or you want to look at it as a distinct group, at least, if you're slicing it that way.
I think so.
So if you want to slice and dice, then, I mean, you should check, I don't know who the researcher, like, but and I'm not a survey scientist, like some of the people at Google who I consult with, but the way I understand this is that you would need many more responses than what you're doing to get confidence for each of these, to get the confidence that you want for each of these groups.
Gotcha. Okay, I will take a look at the segment breakdown then, for sure.
Yeah, because so if I understand it right, where it would be a little different is if you, like if your sample size were very small, for example, if you were like, there are things that I've done, for example, if I do internal research at Google, at GV, and like there are only 20 people, like that is the whole population, then the numbers become very different. But once you're in like millions, it's kind of a different calculation for what sample size you need.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Is there a
so
good
double check.
Is there a calculation we can take and apply to this to make it a little bit easier? Any recommendations?
Of how many you need?
Yeah.
Well, that number, that 384 number that's there, so that'll give you the plus or minus 5%. So for each of those groups, if you want that confidence for each of those groups, then you'll need those kind of samples for each group.
Ah, I see. Okay.
That makes a lot of sense.
So we really just need to like double our responses for each one, or triple in some cases.
I think so. So I feel like I want to go confirm this, and you should double check with your researcher to make sure that I'm not just totally blowing smoke and have this wrong. But that's my understanding. So let's double check that. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah. So I think that's how that works. But let's double check it. And if your researcher is like he's totally smoking dope, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, then that's probably true. Okay. And having more, if it's possible to get more responses, it also gives you the flexibility to slice and dice it a little differently. If you do end up, if it becomes important, for example, that you realize, oh, we want to slice it by size of the dev teams, like you'll get or any of these other things, by the project architecture, whatever, pretty fast you'll just have a sample that's too little in each of those groups. So it'll be hard to do any further analysis on that. So if in fact you do want, because you're looking for a bunch of mixes, a bunch of different variables, you could end up with a bunch of little groups. You're like, oh, we have 12 people who are in a team size like this who are doing microservices. And then not sure what you do with that.
Right.
Some of that you'll have to the counter with just the reality of, I don't know how easy or hard it is to get that many people to respond to these things. So your researcher might tell you like, that sounds fine, but the reality is there's not a chance in hell we're going to get 1,000 people to respond to this thing. In which case you're like, oh, okay, we'll have to, adjust.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so let's go further down. What piece of package image are most important? So I'm just reading through this. So survey question. So I write, review, and deliver front-end code. So why would this necessarily be a single select? Is it not, it's impossible that somebody would do front-end code and back-end code? Or any of these other things? These are necessarily mutually exclusive?
I didn't really address the mutual exclusivity. In terms of front-end and back-end, if you do both, then you'd be the full stack. But there's also people who do front-end and mobile or do system admin and other things. So it should probably be a multi-select. I'll have to look into that to see how that should be broken out.
Okay, so we want to make sure people can find themselves in your questions.
Right.
Best describes the size of the development team you're on. Okay, and when people, so sorry, I'm just going to ask you a bunch of ignorant questions. When you ask somebody about the size of their development team, does everybody agree on like how to define development team? So would I know, does that mean engineers or does that mean PMs and engineers? Does that, like, what does that include? What do you actually ask?
I am actually looking for the number of people who code. That's what matters to me. So it would be the developers, not necessarily the entire product team.
Yeah, so
so we should probably clarify.
Yeah.
Does that line up, Tim? I don't want to speak for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we should try and capture product managers who might do a little coding. I think we're looking for people who are living in it.
Yeah, so it's like full-time or dedicated to coding or something like that. Yeah, right. So I would ask that.
Would you,
go ahead.
sorry, would you use the activity like we do above, where we don't necessarily ask, are you a developer? We ask, is your like primary task coding or developing code? Should it be action-based or title-based?
Which is important to you? Which is the thing that you want to capture? I assume it's like people who are doing the thing.
Yeah, it would be doing the thing. Yes, I should have been able to answer that. Okay, never mind.
No, that's okay. Sometimes you can tell I think aloud a lot. So, yeah. So it's the people who are doing the thing that you're trying to understand what's important to them. So let's focus on that. The project structure. Okay, so again, are these mutually exclusive? Is this, I don't know enough of it to know what these things are, to be frank. So are these?
Yeah, so that's why we ask about your current project, is to kind of specify as the most recent thing. Usually it has to be one or the other. So you can't be a mono repo and also do microservices.
Is there a chance that a person is working on more than one thing?
Yeah, no, that is a possibility for sure.
It is possible, but I think limiting it to current project was a good way of tackling it, because we're just trying to say, okay, what's top of mind for you? And it's probably not it's likely that people work on multiple projects over the course of their career, but at a given time, usually what we found from talking to people is they focus on one main project.
Okay, it's not like I'm working on helping somebody with this thing and also on that thing, and one is one and one is the other.
Yeah, from what at least from the research we've seen, that is true. Like, especially the more senior developers will say they work on multiple things, but in terms of architecture, usually if they're at a company, they're mostly microservices or mostly monolith.
Okay, so if we wanted to be more specific, you could say something like your primary project or your current. I mean, because it sounds like the thing you want to get is like the thing that you're spending most of your time on now. Like that's what you mean. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you might want to clarify that a little bit. This is what happens, or what I worry about with surveys, or what happens is, given the chance to misunderstand or to interpret something differently than what you ask, you'll end up with some people who just go a different direction. And so anything we can do to be as precise as possible is just try to reduce that. You'll still get some wackiness, but that's okay.
Makes total sense.
Okay, so which are you using on your most recent project?
Yeah, so we should develop consistency so that it's your current primary project, and we just kind of refer to the same project over and over again, so we don't end up with like, well, sometimes I do this, but sometimes I do that.
Yeah, right. So there's some, like for some particular thing, like answer these, that they're answering it based on that. Yeah, okay. And this is multi-select, okay. I see, and then it pipes them or routes them out to one of these things.
Yep. I did have a question about that other question. So there's a limited number of selections, and these are kind of what we're either about to offer or currently offer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it would be useful information, but do you think it would deteriorate the survey if we also included some other perspective options so that we know kind of what they would like to be seeing, or should we kind of stick to what's in our purview right now?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I exactly understood. So is it possible that they are using other things that are not listed here? Is that what you mean?
It's totally possible. We have a list of alternative or other options that we haven't gotten to yet. And so as a piece of data, I'd love to know which ones of those are most important to these same users. But we're not currently offering them, and we don't have any follow-up questions for them. Do you think it's still valuable to ask the question with the larger array of options, or stick to just the ones we're focused on right now?
I think it's useful to answer the larger, but that's not knowing how long is that larger list. Is it a very long list, or is it like a few more?
I have the list in front of me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Because if the list is too long, then it will degrade kind of what's going on.
Yeah, so there's 5 more options.
That's probably okay. It starts getting a bit long. Are they all equal, or is there like a few of those you might want to throw in?
I'd say take out Swift. That's probably not interesting. But other than that, yeah, if we did Python, NuGet, Ruby, and Composer, those would probably be good. And Linux is a little confusing because then you have to get in, well, is it Debian or RPM?
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to interrupt your flow, Michael.
No, that's good. Yeah. The other thing that I do, it sounds like this isn't relevant here, but sometimes what I also do is when I'm writing the survey, I'm adding in other options, like a broader set of options, partly just to hide the things that I'm most interested in, or to obscure what I think. Like if there's maybe a different way to say it is, if there's a company and there's something and if they're a little sensitive about letting people know which thing that they're working on or that they might be working on, then we include some variety of stuff so it's not as obvious which one that they might do. Does that make sense? I'm explaining this like not in English, but
no, it makes total sense, right? You want to make sure the survey doesn't point to, what results we want, or suggesting what we're going to be working on.
Right, and I don't know
vague,
that,
right?
yeah. So I don't know that that's relevant here, but in case it is, I mention that also. Okay, and so then you're routing people to these different sections, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So this ranking comes back to what I was mentioning before. You'll get a ranking. It will be very difficult for someone to rank this many items. This is a pretty long list.
Okay.
Actually, like you should try it for yourself. I don't know if you've taken it. Like if you try to rank this in a survey setting, it's like you can probably pick your top some, but then it gets hard. Like what's the difference between number 7 and number 8? Like, you know what I mean?
Okay. What do you think is a good goal number? Well, that's kind of hard to say, but what's a good number of options to stack rank?
I would shoot for, I don't know, something like 5 to 7, something closer in that range. This is a little overwhelming.
Okay.
I think you could, what you should do with this is test it with some people, like hand it to one of your developers and say like, could you do this before you send this out to a lot of people? And if
that's our
like,
next step.
Yeah, good. Right, because they're like, hey, this is totally not a problem. I can do this. I'm an engineer and I'm brilliant and this is easy. Then that's fine. Whereas for me, it's overwhelming.
That makes sense.
But back to that other point of like what happens if you have a stack rank, and I would do that. So show it to people and have them stack rank, and then see, and then like talk to them about it, like which actually are important, and see if it no, this is exactly like measure, it shows the relative importance, and it's really kind of a very linear degradation of importance, or if they're like, no, it's actually these 4, and I don't care about this other stuff. Yeah. Anyway, so you understand my feeling about the ranking.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How many teams is your? And these ranges, are these? Will people know that? Like NPM packages, how many team? And I don't know what team would include here, but will people know that number?
I believe they should. I've run it across a few people, and they've been able to answer that pretty quickly.
Okay.
Usually, they may not know all of the dependencies involved, which sometimes end up touching the packages, but they definitely know the ones that they need to be paying attention to and can estimate where the number is.
Got it. Okay. And is there a reason to provide numbers like this rather than just to say how many and just have it open-ended?
I don't know if there's any value in bucketing them. So we could definitely look into just giving a range.
I mean, it depends on how many questions. It's easier to answer when it's a range.
Yeah, I think that these ranges are the ones that will matter to us. And so knowing where they fit into the ranges is going to be helpful. And I don't know if getting the exact number is really that valuable, because that would be something the range makes sense, but the individual variance isn't going to be very important.
Okay. So here you have 6 to 10 and then 10 to 20. So one of these needs to be one of these 10s needs to be different.
Yeah, that's a good call.
An average month, how often do your team's packages get created? So I'm just looking at somebody wrote some other note on there.
Yeah, so we just got feedback, so I apologize. These two questions I am going to try to reword because a couple people have said it's a little confusing.
Got it. Okay. To the best of your knowledge, what percentage of the total packages in your registry are actively being used? Again, this is something somebody would know?
I think they would be able to recognize the range. During the user interviews, we got answers that kind of fit into one of those buckets. These specifics got a little bit more confusing to be able to figure it out.
Okay. Actively being used. And is that a phrasing people will know, like actively being used?
I wonder if we should switch it to actively being pulled, but I would want to talk to an engineer to see how they would refer to a package being pulled from the registry and being used, which is what I'm looking for. So I'll confirm with them.
Okay. Primary reason you visit NPM registry.
This is a question that is in a couple of different sections, and I'm debating whether it should be pulled out or not. And I'd love your thoughts on it.
This is an example of a question that I might make open-ended.
Oh, and just have it as like an open text field and just not try to put them into a specific bucket?
Yeah, I mean, so this is an example. If you've already done enough of the enough early research and you know actually these are the reasons. If you already know that, then you don't need to leave it open-ended. So it depends on kind of how far along you are in narrowing that down. But if you know like this is what it is, then it's good to ask them this way.
What do you think, Tim? I'm a little hesitant.
Well, I tend to be a minimalist, so I think maybe we could take it out. Although it's an easy question to answer, right? Like it has only a few responses. Maybe it makes sense to just leave it in.
Yeah, and I guess what I wasn't asking is whether to keep it or leave it or toss it, but it's whether to make it an open-ended question versus multiple choice like this.
Let me see.
So what I was saying is if you guys from the work you've already done, you know like this is really what the set of options are, and we know that, then it's fine as an open-ended. Then it's fine as a multiple choice. If you're not, depending on what your confidence is that these are really the things, then we might want to do more open-ended at this stage.
I like it and having other there for the open-ended piece.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it as multiple choice. I think we captured from the user research we did and everything. I think we captured a good list here.
Okay, great, that's good. And then I'm just going through the next stuff. So the same things that we just talked about kind of applied down here too.
Yep.
Because these are all the same kind of thing.
Correct. One of the things I was hoping to glean is how much of a difference there is between the different registries. So if the data that's most important is super different, then we need to treat the UIs differently in the IA. Right. But if they all end up being the same or close to the same, that kind of guides a different choice.
So it sounds like it will be important to you to get enough sample of using each of these architectures. Is that right? Because that sounds like is that what you're saying? That's what you want to be able to compare?
The different repositories.
Sorry.
Like Maven versus. Yeah.
Right.
I'm just getting used to the terminology, so it's all on me. So being able to compare Maven versus NPM versus Docker is something I'd like to be able to do. Okay. I don't have any data, I don't think yet, about how much one is used compared to the other, so it's hard for me to create a sample size.
I see. Okay.
Kind of question around that.
Okay, but it sounds like you'll want a request to the researcher or whoever's setting up your sampling is just make sure that they know that that's what you want to be able to compare. So then as results are coming in or whatever, that if you see like, oh, we're getting all of one or the other, can we make sure that either is there anybody out there who's even using the other thing? Are we not getting them because nobody's using it, or do we just need to do something different to make sure we get enough, whatever, Maven people versus Conan?
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Lori brought up, the researcher, is that about halfway through the survey, we'll sit down and look at what the results are so far and what the users that have actually responded have been, and make a kind of judgment calls on where we need more information and where things are kind of lining up.
That's awesome. That's great. And so a person, it's multi-select. So somebody could be answering this for NPM and Conan, for example, right? They could be going through those different pieces.
Correct.
Okay. And is the list of things that they're ranking different, or is it the same? It's different for each of these, or is it the same list of stuff?
It's a different list of stuff, but the list has a lot of the same things, but it may be in Maven's terminology versus NPM, or it could be NPM does have a unique piece of data that others don't. So there is a little bit of variance. Okay.
Yeah, like I'm looking at the Conan list. Like that is a really long list to rank. Okay, yeah. I mean, your next step of testing this with a bunch of people will be really important, and then you'll just see which parts are fine and which parts. You'll see a combination of things. One is how hard or easy is it for someone to do this, and what's confusing to them. And the other thing that I always like to see is you have a bunch of people take it, and then you can see what you get on the back end, and you're like, oh, it's not showing me the thing I thought it was going to show me. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so that'll be good.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll try. When you do surveys and you get them reviewed, do you sit in on them doing it, or do you just kind of send them the survey and ask for them to react? So does that make sense?
Yeah. So the first step for something like this is treat it like almost a usability test. So if you can have them talk through it while they do it, that can be pretty helpful. As you get more confidence and adjust it and fix it, then you can send it to a group of people and maybe not have to sit there. But the first ones you do, I think it would be pretty helpful to hear people the same way you do a usability thing, to explain like, oh, what's going on here? What does this mean? I don't understand. What is this? All that stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not that long a survey, so it shouldn't take you too long to do that with a handful of people. Yeah. I don't want to make this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No worries. Thank you so much for walking through that survey. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And let me know as you get closer if that can be useful to do another round or whatever's helpful to you.
Yeah, we'll definitely reach out for sure.
Okay. Awesome. Anything else I can help you with today, or that's pretty much what you're focused on?
That's what I'm focused on. Tim, do you have any other questions or thoughts?
No, I think the next step would be for us to, like we mentioned, validate the survey, which we're doing now with our development team. They're really helpful giving feedback. We could probably do that with them in real time. I like that idea a lot. And then we'll code it up in Qualtrics and send it out. And then after that, maybe the next step would be to review the results.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so we might not be ready with that then next week. It might be the week after that, right? By the time we code the survey up and get responses.
Probably. Yeah, that's probably right.
Okay. Okay, so I'll reschedule this meeting for not next week, but the week after, and we'll send over the survey so you could take it yourself, Michael, and give any last feedback. We're really interested in how many Conan packages.
Yeah, I can tell you right now how many Conan packages I'm using. I think I've watched Conan, but that's a little different.
Well, the Late Show or the Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Oh yeah, I was thinking Conan what is it? Conan the Destroyer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll send some stuff over when we have it, and then I'll just schedule this meeting preemptively for 2 weeks from now.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay.
Nice job. It looks like you guys are making good progress.
Thanks, Ian, for
Thank you.
taking that. Okay.
All right. All right. I'll talk to you guys
Bye.
soon. Bye.